Have you ever poured your heart into something, working diligently, staying faithful, and still felt like no one noticed? Like your effort just disappeared into the background? Now imagine you're Ruth, a young widow in a foreign land with no money, no protection, and no real reason to hope. But instead of collapsing under the weight of her situation, she makes a bold, simple decision to go work in the fields and pick up scraps of grain. Not glamorous, not safe, but honest. And that moment, mundane as it seems, sets in motion a chain of events that changes her future forever. Today we're diving into Ruth chapter 2, a portion of scripture that quietly but powerfully reveals how hard work and divine providence intersect. It shows us how human initiative doesn't compete with faith, it partners with it. Ruth didn't sit around waiting for her situation to change. She got up, moved forward, and trusted that something good could come from her effort. Here's the twist. Ruth didn't know whose field she'd end up in. She just went out to glean. And, as it turned out, she found herself in the field of Boaz, a man who would become a key part of God's redemptive plan. Coincidence? Not likely. In this video, we'll explore why Ruth's humble effort mattered more than she realized, how Boaz's kindness mirrored God's heart, and how seemingly random events may actually be divinely arranged. By the end, you'll be encouraged to keep going, to keep working, keep trusting, and believe that your effort, no matter how small, might be part of something far bigger than you can see. Let's begin. Ruth chapter 2 opens with a quiet decision that speaks volumes. She says to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain." Simple, right? But think about what that really means. She's a foreigner, a widow, no protection, no status. In ancient Israel, that meant danger, vulnerability, potential harassment. But Ruth doesn't sit still in fear or self-pity. She steps forward, choosing dignity over despair. She doesn't wait for circumstances to improve. She moves forward, even when the path is uncertain. This act isn't just brave, it's deeply humble. Gleaning wasn't glamorous. It was hard work, often under the hot sun, bending down all day for scraps. But it was also a God-given opportunity. According to Leviticus 19:9-10 and Deuteronomy 24:19, landowners were commanded to leave behind the edges of their fields and any leftover grain for the poor, the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner. It was a system built by God to combine justice with compassion. Ruth wasn't entitled. She didn't demand handouts. She stepped into that divine provision with humility and diligence. This was work, gritty, exhausting, often thankless, but she embraced it without complaint. And here's where the story turns. As it turned out, she found herself gleaning in the field of Boaz. That tiny phrase is bursting with significance. It's the narrator's way of quietly saying, "Pay attention. This is no coincidence. It may look ordinary, but God is at work behind the scenes." Ruth didn't receive a divine message. No angel appeared. She just got up and did what was right. And in doing so, she walked straight into a story of provision, protection, and future redemption. There's something deeply reassuring in that. We don't always need a sign from heaven. Sometimes faith looks like doing the next right thing with courage and trust. Ruth's initiative wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it was exactly what God used to position her for blessing. That's the power of faithful action. God moves through it. Boaz enters the story quietly, but his actions speak volumes. When he arrives in the field and greets his workers with, "The Lord be with you," and they respond in kind, it tells us something. This is a man of character. His leadership is marked by respect and godliness. This isn't a man who only talks faith. He lives it, even in how he treats those under his authority. So when he notices Ruth among the gleaners, it's no surprise that he takes an interest, not out of curiosity alone, but out of compassion. He asks his foreman, "Whose young woman is this?" And the foreman explains, "She's the Moabite who came back with Naomi. She asked politely if she could glean and has been working from morning until now with barely a moment's rest." That one observation, her steady, respectful, tireless work, sets the tone for everything that follows. Ruth didn't try to stand out. She simply did the work with quiet excellence, and that made all the difference. Boaz responds with generosity and protection. He tells Ruth not to go to any other field, not because he wants to control her, but to keep her safe. He instructs his men not to touch her, a serious protection in a time when a lone woman in the field was vulnerable. He offers her water, usually reserved for the hired workers, and he invites her to eat with him and his crew, a radical gesture of inclusion for a foreigner. During the meal, Boaz doesn't sit back and let someone else serve her. He personally offers her roasted grain. That moment isn't just kind, it's honoring. He sees her dignity, even when society might not. But Boaz goes even further. He instructs his workers to let Ruth glean among the sheaves, the already gathered bundles, and to intentionally drop extra grain for her. He doesn't just make space for her in his field. He makes success easier for her without making her feel like a charity case. That's grace in action. Boaz does far more than what the law required. According to Levitical law, he was only required to let her glean. But Boaz embodies the spirit behind the law. He shows mercy, generosity, and deep kindness. His actions echo the character of God himself. Boaz becomes a living picture of Christ, our Redeemer, stepping into our need, going beyond what's required, and offering protection, provision, and grace. As the sun sets on a long day, Ruth returns home, not empty-handed but carrying nearly an ephah of barley. That's around 30 to 50 pounds of grain. For someone gleaning leftovers, this is no ordinary haul. It's not just a sign of effort, it's a sign that someone went out of their way to bless her. When Naomi sees the amount Ruth has gathered, she's amazed. "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you," she exclaims. And when Ruth mentions Boaz, everything changes. That name flips a switch in Naomi's heart. This isn't just a random act of kindness. Boaz is a kinsman redeemer, a close relative who under the law had the right to redeem property and restore family lineage. In a moment, Naomi's hopelessness starts to unravel. She sees the fingerprints of God on this encounter. She immediately tells Ruth to stay in Boaz's fields for the entire harvest season. For safety, yes, but also because she senses that this meeting was no accident. Ruth had gone out that morning just hoping to survive. She came back with a harvest and a glimmer of redemption. That's the power of divine timing. This part of the story reminds us that God's provision often begins quietly. What starts as daily bread may lead to lifelong transformation. Ruth didn't know what her hard work would lead to, but her faithfulness opened the door for grace to walk in. Even in your own life, a simple act of showing up, staying faithful, and doing what you can might be exactly what God uses to shift everything. Small obedience can lead to supernatural outcomes. The story of Ruth chapter 2 isn't just a historical account. It's a deeply practical guide for living faithfully in uncertain times. Let's draw out 5 powerful takeaways that still speak to us today. 1. Blend initiative with faith. Ruth didn't wait around hoping for a miracle. She acted. She stepped out in humility and faith, knowing the road would be hard. Her example teaches us that action doesn't oppose trust in God. It completes it. When we move forward with wisdom and obedience, we're creating space for God's providence to show up. 2. Providence hides in plain sight. The phrase, "as it turned out," in verse 3 is easy to overlook, but it's loaded with meaning. To the outside eye, Ruth just randomly ended up in Boaz's field. But to the reader, it's obvious. God was guiding her all along. The same is true for us. The job you took, the conversation you had, the challenge you're facing. It might be more directed than you think. God is often most active when he seems most silent. 3. Let generosity be intentional. Boaz didn't just react to Ruth's need. He planned to meet it. He gave instructions to his workers to make her path easier. This wasn't about doing the bare minimum. It was about showing the heart of God. We too can look for ways to be generous in advance. Whether it's time, attention, or resources, intentional kindness changes lives. 4. Your integrity is your testimony. Ruth didn't preach or push her way forward. Her reputation was built on consistency, respect, and effort. and people noticed. Sometimes the most powerful witness isn't what we say. It's how we carry ourselves when no one else watching. 5. Redemption begins with a yes. It all started when Ruth said yes. To God, to Naomi, to the hard work. That yes became a doorway to blessing. Your yes, no matter how small, may be the first step in a divine story already in motion. Ruth's story in chapter 2 shows us that faith doesn't mean waiting. It means walking. That even when you're gathering scraps, God may be preparing a harvest. That simple acts of courage, humility, and integrity can lead to divine encounters and redemptive outcomes. So wherever you are, whether in a season of scarcity or stepping into the unknown, remember this: your effort matters, your faith matters, and God is always at work behind the scenes. If this encouraged you, give the video a like, subscribe for more faith-based insights, and drop a comment. What's one small step of faith you're taking today?